Hey friends, tonight let's explore how reindeer, yes, actual antlered snow machines became sacred messengers in the Middle Ages. No sleighs, no jingles, just hooves frost, and a whole lot of medieval superstition. You're standing in a clearing. It's so quiet the snow actually squeaks under your boots. Your breath turns into little clouds that puff up, pause, and vanish like polite ghosts. All around you, the forest is hushed, blanketed under a pale blue light. Not moonlight, this is something else. Northern light. Cold dancing across the sky like some ancient ribbon, waving down a greeting from the gods. Or maybe just saying, hey, your nose looks frozen. You follow a trail. No, not a trail. A path. Tamped down by hooves, neat, orderly, spiraling toward a small wooden shrine wrapped in furs and moss. On its door, a carved symbol, a reindeer poised mid-leap. Above it, a halo. Not subtle. This isn't just decoration. In this part of the medieval world, especially across Lapland, Karelia, and parts of Norse-influenced Europe, reindeer weren't just animals. They were omens, messengers, living postcards from the divine. You didn't eat them lightly. You didn't chase them off your farm. If a reindeer wandered into your village, you paid attention. Some people lit candles. Others sang. Now here's the popular historical fact. For tonight, in medieval Scandinavia, reindeer were seen as vessels for spiritual communication. That is, quite literally, some folks believed they carried prayers across the snow to whoever might be listening above. Kind of like Amazon Prime, but holier and with more fur. Monks in remote outposts, especially those trying to convert the local Sami populations, recorded sightings of celestial deer during strange atmospheric phenomena like auroras or sudden winter storms. One manuscript describes a silver-limbed beast emerging from wind, which, let's be honest, either sounds like a religious vision or a very poetic reindeer having a dramatic entrance. And the odd detail: some medieval maps from this region show reindeer paths as glowing lines, literally inked in shimmering mica-based paint, connecting shrines, not towns. It's like the Google Maps of holiness, except you need antlers to navigate. But was this really belief, or just a bit of medieval marketing? That's where things get fuzzy. Some scholars argue that Christian monks adopted the image of the reindeer to translate local Sami animist beliefs into something church-approved. After all, if the villagers already thought reindeer were sacred, why not lean in and say sure? And they also deliver sermons now. Others disagree, saying the veneration of reindeer wasn't co-opted, but tolerated as long as it kept people away from sacrificing, say, goats. Compromise is the cornerstone of any good empire, and apparently of stable deer relations. Anyway, tonight, you're part of a small procession. No one talks. They just walk. Ahead, a reindeer tall and still stands beneath a pine tree, crusted with frost. Its breath puffs in time with yours. The little girl bows to it and offers a piece of salted root. The reindeer sniffs it, once doesn't even blink, and then walks into the trees, just like that. Gone. The group murmurs softly. Someone lights a lantern, and then that's it. No speeches, no songs. Just a quiet turn back to the village. Later by the fire, someone explains the reindeer appeared on the first frost day, the same as every year. It always shows up, always in silence, always leaves. Some say it's the same one. Some say it's the spirit of the snow itself. No one really knows. But everyone sleeps better afterward, and so do you. Maybe it's the heat from the fire. Or maybe it's something else. Something with hooves, walking softly across the edge of dreams. Oh, and before you drift off, did you know reindeer hooves actually click when they walk, thanks to a tendon that snaps over bone? It helps them hear each other in a blizzard. That's medieval surround sound. Also, medieval children sometimes made toy reindeer out of birch bark. It was less about play, more about protection. Keep the spirits happy with tiny antlers. And finally, one very confused tax record from 1278 lists a reindeer as a seasonal land courier. So somewhere out there, a reindeer was literally on payroll. Now dim, the lights maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're moving again this time, along a mountain ridge where the sky hangs low like it's trying to eavesdrop. The air is so thin, it whistles between your teeth when you breathe, and snow crunches under your boots with a satisfying rhythm. Every sound feels like a secret. Even the wind seems to hush itself. Ahead of you, a monk trudges forward his robe, damp at the hem, clutching a small leather satchel. Next to him, a reindeer. Calm, steady, and considerably more graceful on the ice than either of you. It carries 2 saddlebags, one stuffed with wax-sealed scrolls, the other with wrapped parcels. And you realize with some disbelief that you are trailing a postal reindeer. Welcome to the medieval monastery circuit of the far north, where horses refused to go and pigeons got frostbite. Here, in the biting quiet of winter, reindeer were not just sacred, they were useful. Like divine interns who also delivered your mail and didn't complain about lunch breaks. The monks who lived in these isolated peaks had one problem: communication. Snowed in for months with few roads and fewer visitors, they depended on courier routes that could only be managed by one animal built like a snowplow in a fur coat. That animal, obviously, was the reindeer. Now here's the historical fact. For tonight, during the 13th and 14th centuries, several monastic orders in the northern Alps and parts of Scandinavia trained reindeer to carry both spiritual texts and winter offerings between abbeys. It wasn't widespread, but where it happened, it was revered. Imagine being so important that your delivery system gets its own feast day. Yes, that happened once. St. Corvinus of Sarek. Long story. Mostly snow. But how do you even train a reindeer? Turns out very gently and with mushrooms. Not those kinds of mushrooms. Don't get excited. We're talking dried moss snacks and patience. Reindeer aren't horses. They don't obey. They collaborate. Which means if the reindeer didn't feel like walking uphill in a blizzard to deliver your 3rd copy of Psalms, it simply wouldn't. And everyone respected that. This brings us to tonight's peculiar detail in a monastery's surviving winter journal. From 1292, there's a line that reads, "The reindeer did not proceed. We too stayed behind. That's not logistics, that's poetry. And possibly a medieval form of time off. You pause beside a frozen stream, watching the monk feed the reindeer a handful of lichen. There's reverence in the way he moves, as if this isn't just an animal, but a partner in some silent sacred duty. And maybe it is. Some reindeer in these courier roles even had names written into the margins of illuminated manuscripts. One was called Fruma, which loosely translates to first snow. Another, Jarnfot Iron Foot. And my personal favorite, Thomas the Slightly Moist, which raises questions. But it wasn't all serene mountain treks and dignified snacking. One old tale found scribbled in a sermon's back page describes a reindeer that got miraculously lost and returned 2 weeks later carrying an entirely different letter. The abbot took it as a divine rerouting. Others suspect the reindeer just stopped at a nicer abbey with better hay. Now, for your academic thought starter, were these reindeer actually seen as sacred, or was their symbolism a retroactive layer of holiness slapped on by writers romanticizing harsh logistics? You know how history loves to put halos on anything that survived a snowstorm. The scholars disagree. Some say the idea of messenger reindeer is tangled in folklore and exaggerated by 19th century ethnographers eager to find mystical animals in every snowbank. Others argue that the symbolic weight was always part of the package literally. You can't tie a ribbon to an animal in a religious ceremony and then say, it's just cargo. Back to your walk. Snow is falling again gently, like the sky is laying down lace. The reindeer beside you exhales a long white plume and then flicks its ears. The monk nods, adjusts his robe, and the procession continues. Far in the distance, a tiny spire peeks through the fog, a monastery perched on the cliff edge like a stubborn idea. The reindeer picks up pace. It knows the way, maybe always has. Oh, and in case you're wondering, yes, some monasteries in the far north built special antler rests outside their doors. Little wooden rails where reindeer could be tied up politely in pairs, like a medieval parking lot, but fluffier. And yes, one Latin account calls them Servus Angelus Deer of the angels. And finally, a fun image to carry into sleep somewhere in 1300s. Norway, a monk once accidentally sent a love poem instead of a liturgical chant because he put the wrong scroll into the reindeer's saddlebag. The poem arrived. So did a scandal. And probably a very awkward Lent. Go ahead, lower the light switch on a gentle fan for some calming white noise, and let's begin our evening adventure. You're walking on packed snow, now dense, crunchy, and sparkling, just enough to make you feel like you've wandered into a mildly haunted snow globe. Your boots creak with every step, and the world smells like pine sap and cold iron. Beside you, a group of villagers is gathered in hushed awe around a chapel built entirely of ice. And standing just in front of it, a bishop in a fur-lined mitre and a reindeer who appears to be kneeling. That's right. Tonight we're witnessing one of the more legendary and slightly theatrical events in reindeer history, the miracle of the kneeling reindeer. Cue choir. Cue suspicious medieval side eyes, according to a 14th century hagiography. Yes, that's the kind of manuscript written to document lives of saints and other very holy happenings. A bishop in the northern region of what's now Sweden was journeying through a snowstorm to bless a newly built winter chapel. Things weren't going great. Visibility was awful, his attendants were freezing, and everyone was losing hope. But then, cue dramatic wind out of the swirling snow, came a reindeer. Not just any reindeer, a large one, silver-coated, heavy-antlered, and completely unfazed by the weather. It walked straight up to the bishop, lowered itself onto its front knees, and stayed there, like it was presenting itself for a benediction, or maybe just politely saying, "I'm the miracle you ordered." The bishop took this as a divine sign. Naturally, he blessed the reindeer. The storm cleared within an hour, and from that day on, the reindeer was considered a living sign of sanctity. Its presence marked holy ground. Its sneeze was noted in 3 different diaries. Now we can't verify the sneeze, but the account of this event was popular enough to make it into multiple ecclesiastical records. One even includes a sketch of the reindeer mid-kneel with a golden glow around its antlers, which looks suspiciously like someone drew a really holy chandelier. Tonight's historical fact reindeer weren't just symbols of survival or utility. In certain corners of medieval Christendom, especially in areas where local animism merged with Christianity, they were considered direct conduits of the divine. The idea of an animal kneeling in prayer wasn't seen as absurd. It was a lesson. If even a reindeer could humble itself before heaven, so could you. No pressure. And here's your wonderfully weird detail. After the miracle, local nobles began trying to teach their reindeer to kneel. Yes, really. There are marginal notes in estate books with instructions like tilt, head, gently hold, front leg, whisper, Psalm 23. Spoiler, it did not go well. Most reindeer declined the invitation to piety and instead nibbled the bishop's gloves. But there's also a fun academic debate here. Some medievalists argue that this so-called kneeling may have simply been a behavior mistaken for submission, like a reindeer lowering its head to sniff snow or reacting to a patch of ice. Others argue that the record was symbolic, not literal, more parable than National Geographic. Still, the fact that multiple scribes took the time to write it down, decorate it with gold leaf, and copy it into religious texts says something. Whether or not it physically happened isn't always the point. The story mattered. It traveled. Speaking of travel, you've now arrived at the edge of a small mountain hamlet. A local priest is reenacting the scene with a carved wooden reindeer and a choir of slightly off-key children. You are offered warm berry mead and a seat near the fire. No one expects you to kneel, though the wooden reindeer appears to be judging you slightly. And before the fire makes your eyelids heavy, here are a few closing tidbits to tuck under your woolen hood. A small chapel in Yokmok still keeps a ceremonial bell for the reindeer's mass. It hasn't been used in centuries, but the bell is polished every December just in case. The reindeer from the miracle. Allegedly, it disappeared the next spring. Some said it wandered into the mountains. Others believed it ascended. The bishop insisted it simply went where it was needed next. A reindeer with a seasonal contract. And yes, in case you're wondering, the reindeer has a name in the later legends, Yartur, meaning dearly beloved. Very on brand. Now turn down the lights, perhaps start a fan to create a soothing ambiance, and join me as we slowly dive into tonight's story. You're inside now. A tiny hut, low ceiling, thick wooden beams above your head dusted with frost. The fire crackles low in the corner, smoke curling lazily into the rafters, like it's not quite sure where to go. You're flipping through a worn, leather-bound book. No title, no author, just strange little drawings of hooves and halos and symbols that look suspiciously like reindeer tracks wearing tiny shoes. And next to the sketches, a line of careful script in faded ink. When the sacred came near it, walked not on feet, but hooves. Tonight, you're peeking into the quieter corners of history, the marginalia, the folklore, the whispers written in the backs of dusty manuscripts. This isn't the grand church stuff. This is the folk faith, the in-between spaces where reindeer slip through from being animals to becoming something more. Not saints, not gods. Something in between. Something sacredish. Here's your fact in several surviving medieval texts. Not just stories, but religious relic inventories. Reindeer are occasionally listed as accompanying vessels. What does that mean? No one agrees. Some say it refers to their presence during the transportation of holy relics across snowbound regions. Others think it was a euphemism for something else entirely, like saying, "We got this bone of Saint Someone," and also the reindeer who witnessed it. Just in case, yes, you heard that right. Sometimes the reindeer got relic status, not a jawbone or a knuckle wrapped in gold, but a tuft of winter fur, a sliver of polished antler, or allegedly a reindeer hoofprint pressed into wax and stored in a cedar box. These were carried by traveling monks, hung from belts, or placed on shrine altars, not because the reindeer was worshipped, but because it had been there. And in the Middle Ages, being there witnessing a holy moment could make even a stick or rock sacred. So why not a reindeer? And now, your strange side note, there's one preserved scroll in a French monastery that includes a rather poetic but deeply confusing entry about a starlit deer that guided a monk to a hidden reliquary in the forest after he got lost in a snowstorm. The monk insists the reindeer had eyes like old lamps and smelled faintly of myrrh. Skeptics suggest the monk may have eaten a bit too much fermented fish before that walk. But believers, they see it as a sign that animals, particularly reindeer, could act as guardians of the divine. Divine UPS with antlers. There's a tension in the text, though. Not everyone agreed on what reindeer represented. Some writers, especially those working for urban clergy, saw these rural beliefs as problematic, which is medieval, for we don't like this, but can't stop it. You'll find one bishop noting disapprovingly that locals sang of deer who glow, which sounds delightful to you, but apparently deeply unholy to him. So what's the academic debate here? It boils down to this: were reindeer treated as messengers because of religious influence, or were they folded into religious symbolism because of their practical daily roles? Did the church borrow reindeer, or did reindeer borrow holiness? You glance up from the manuscript and spot something curious on the mantle, a tiny carved reindeer figure no taller than your thumb with a golden spiral etched into its side. A child's toy, a good luck charm, or maybe just a way to say, "I see you, snow spirit." And as the wind howls briefly outside, let's consider 3 last oddities before sleep claims you. In the region of Hami, Finland, there were winter riddles passed down orally that used reindeer as metaphors for divine mysteries. Example: it walks without words, gives warmth with no fire, and remembers paths it's never seen. Some medieval altars in snowy regions included reindeer antlers as side ornaments tied with cloth or hung with coins. They were said to keep away frost demons, or possibly just looked cool. Historians disagree. And once a parchment was found, folded inside a reindeer skin pouch, inscribed only with "He who walks with the hooved does not lose his way," which frankly sounds like excellent advice in both theology and snowstorms. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Snow blankets, everything outside, in velvet silence, but above you, the sky is putting on a light show. Ribbons of green-violet and ghostly blue snake across the darkness, aurora borealis, in full majestic display. You're shivering, not from cold, but from awe. Next to you, a small cluster of villagers has gathered faces, upturned lips, parted. The only creature unfazed. A reindeer, with a dusting of frost on its nose, standing perfectly still, as if it too is part of the sky's secret. Tonight, you're about to witness how for medieval people, the northern lights and reindeer became entwined in a sort of cosmic duet. Not only were the reindeer sacred, but so were the lights above them, a celestial script that could be read if you had the patience and warm enough mittens. Here's your historical fact. Medieval chronicles in northern Scandinavia and Russia contain multiple references to auroras appearing during significant reindeer-related rituals. The timing wasn't lost on anyone. Some thought the aurora was a sign that prayers carried by reindeer, of course, were being heard and answered. It was as if the sky itself was reflecting the movement of the herds below, creating a mystical feedback loop. Medieval ASMR, the hum of the heavens, and the soft snorts of antlers below, and the truly odd detail. In a few illuminated manuscripts, there are actual paintings of reindeer with aurora halos swirling around their antlers. The effect is, well, a bit psychedelic for a 13th century prayer book. One even shows a monk arms raised trying to catch the lights with a velvet banner, while a reindeer sits in the foreground looking politely unimpressed. If you ever wanted evidence that medieval artists got creative, here it is. Tonight, villagers begin their ritual. They circle the reindeer, waving sprigs of spruce dipped in icy water. An old woman chants a song that frankly sounds like she's scolding the sky for not sending better weather. In the middle of the circle, the reindeer blinks. It's not moved by human ritual. Or maybe it is, no one knows, because it starts pawing at the ground, unearthing a tiny piece of quartz. Cue communal gasp. The quartz is picked up and immediately deemed a lightstone proof that the animal has been blessed by the aurora and will now bring luck to the village for the coming year. Someone ties a scrap of red ribbon around its antler, and a child whispers, "Thank you, sky deer." The reindeer naturally ignores this and begins munching on the spruce. But here's where the scholars start to argue. Some anthropologists insist that the link between auroras and reindeer was a purely folkloric construction, a way for isolated communities to find meaning in long, dark winters. Others point to the recurring imagery and written accounts as evidence of a more ritualized, almost proto-religious practice, one that turned every winter night into a cosmic spectacle. You, meanwhile, are left with three odd nuggets. In a remote Russian chronicle, a prince once claimed to have seen a reindeer absorbed by light during an aurora and declared it unfit for eating, so the animal got to live out its life as a village pet. Royal exemption via meteorology. Some medieval Sami shamanic drums depict reindeer surrounded by concentric circles, interpreted as both antlers and auroras, as if to say, everything that matters comes in rings. And finally, an obscure household prayer from Iceland asks for hooves that walk beneath green fires and hearts that know no fear of frost. Kind of makes you wish modern weather apps were this poetic. Academic question for your pillow tonight. Were these rituals designed to honor reindeer, the aurora, or the mysterious coincidence of both appearing together? Or did one just make the other feel a little more magical? Either way, the snow is falling softer now. The lights fade. The villagers yawn. Someone plays a tune on a bone flute, and the reindeer finally decides to move straight for your mitten, which is apparently the most delicious thing it's seen all evening. So before you relax, take a second to like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. Now dim The lights maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're swaying gently now, not because you're tired, though you are, but because you're sitting on a sled. Not the jingly festive kind with red bows, but a sturdy, slightly battered wooden sledge, lashed with rope and lined with pine branches. The ground glides by beneath you in rhythmic bumps, snow, squeaking and hissing. Your ride. A reindeer, of course. And you're not alone. There's a line of sleds behind each, with bundled figures, noses poking out of woolen wraps, eyes blinking away the starlight and wind. This, you realize, is a pilgrimage, but not the warm, candlelit sort. No, this is the snow pilgrimage, a journey made by devout travelers, monks, merchants, and those in need of blessings across the frozen wastes of medieval Scandinavia, drawn by reindeer through a landscape so white it nearly glows. You're not sure where you end and the world begins. Somewhere in the distance, bells jingle not for decoration, but for finding each other in the endless white. Here's your historical fact. During the long medieval winters, especially around the spring, equinox groups from villages and isolated hamlets would band together and travel to sacred sites, some Christian, some much older, by reindeer sled. Walking was impossible, and horses simply couldn't handle the cold or the deep drifts. Only reindeer, with their broad hooves and built-in insulation, could reliably deliver you to your destination and ideally back home again. The journey itself was a blend of hardship and ritual. Each day began with prayers, not for protection from wolves or bandits. Those worries felt almost secondary, but from the cold, always the cold. Sleds would form a winding caravan, each reindeer, with a set of colored ribbons so you didn't lose your ride in a snowstorm. The lead reindeer wore a special harness with carved bone amulets, little protective talismans, clinking together like the world's most anxious wind chime. The peculiar detail for tonight: there's a 14th century pilgrim's guide discovered in northern Sweden that details not only prayers and recommended songs, but also very helpfully recipes for portable black bread, instructions for making fire in sleet, and tips for how to politely thank your reindeer for a safe journey. Pat, neck thrice. Say, bless you, antlers. Leave a bit of bread. Somewhere, an exhausted monk tried to turn common sense into scripture. One account tells of a famous snow pilgrimage that lasted 40 days. 40 days of frozen noses, numbed fingers, and endless blinding snow. The group shared everything: shelter, firewood, laughter, and naturally complaints about how much colder it was last year. Along the way, they left little carved reindeer figurines at waypoints, a silent hope for safe passage. By journey's end, their sleds were lighter, their stories longer, and their faith somehow both more battered and more sturdy. Now, for your academic musing, were these snow pilgrimages acts of devotion, or simply a practical necessity recast as religious tradition? Some historians believe it was the latter. When the land demands effort, you make the effort meaningful. Others see the ritual itself as proof that hardship became a kind of spiritual practice, blurring the line between survival and ceremony. By nightfall, the caravan stops to camp. Fires are built, kettles hung over the flames, and someone pulls out a small instrument to play a tune so old it seems to belong to the wind. The reindeer, meanwhile, get their own treats. Bundles of moss pats on the neck, sometimes even a bit of salt if you're feeling fancy. And before you drift off by firelight, here are 3 details to keep you company. In one chronicle, it's mentioned that pilgrims sometimes tried to predict their luck by the shape of the reindeer's hoof prints in the morning. A perfect print meant good weather. A smudged one, pack an extra blanket. One sled once carried a loaf of bread, blessed by 3 different abbots, and for good measure, a fossilized fish, just in case the reindeer needed inspiration. And yes, there's a record of an especially grumpy reindeer named Stormy, who famously refused to move unless someone sang to it every morning. It was both the most beloved and the most resented member of the caravan, so before you settle in, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy the content here. Go ahead, lower the light switch on a gentle fan for some calming white noise, and let's begin our evening adventure. You wake before dawn, tucked beneath a fur blanket that smells faintly of pine and last night's campfire. Outside, the snow glows blue and soft, and the air carries the silence of places too far north for church bells or cockerels. You stretch blink and catch a glimpse of your breath, little clouds vanishing into a world that at this hour belongs entirely to dreams. Only you're not alone. Across the ashes of the dying fire, a reindeer stands, ears perked and eyes reflecting the dim light. It isn't moving, but you sense it's waiting for something or someone. Next to you, a monk quietly unwraps a scrap of cloth. Inside is a polished stone, a simple wooden charm, and a handful of dried berries. He whispers a prayer in a language that isn't quite Latin and isn't quite anything else you recognize. You realize suddenly that this morning's ritual isn't for the living, but for the spirits. And the reindeer is the intended messenger. Tonight's historical fact. Throughout the medieval North, it was widely believed that reindeer could carry messages between worlds, not just across snowfields, but from the realm of the living to that of the spirits and even the divine. The line between animal and oracle was as thin as a snowflake on your sleeve. The strangest stories come from monastery journals, monks confessing dreams in which reindeer appeared, sometimes speaking in riddles, or warning of floods, famine, or unseasonal thaw. In one particularly memorable account, a reindeer visits a troubled monk in his sleep, warns of a great river rising, and then after the flood returns to accept thanks. The monk leaves an offering of berries and honey, and naturally, the reindeer eats both. Here's tonight's delightfully odd detail. One abbey actually kept a dream diary where each reindeer visitation was sketched alongside the monk's account. Some entries show reindeer with wings, some with crowns of snowflakes, and at least one with a beard. Medieval monks always keeping things interesting. Whenever disaster struck, the monks would reread these entries, looking for patterns or prophecies. Think of it as a very early fur-covered version of a weather app. Modern scholars still debate the meaning. Were these dream reindeer visions simply the product of isolated, anxious minds struggling to find comfort in the long dark? Or did the repetition of these images over centuries and across distant abbeys hint at something more, a shared folk belief? Or even an unofficial order of reindeer prophets? The line between folklore and faith is blurry. Some monks recorded reindeer dreams with all the seriousness of a papal edict. Others scribbled them in the margins between more serious matters like barley harvests and roof repairs. The dreams traveled with the monks, shared from hearth to hearth, eventually blending into a wider pan-Nordic tradition. If you dream of a reindeer, listen. The land is speaking. You finish your morning ritual, by placing a dried berry on a stone, and the reindeer approaches, delicate as moonlight. It pauses, looks you in the eye. Well, you think it's the eye. It's mostly antler and fur, then plucks the berry up, chewing slowly, almost thoughtfully. Here are 3 quirky tidbits to accompany your dreams. In some villages, it was customary to leave an extra pillow out at night for the reindeer spirit to rest, just in case it visited. One 15th century monk wrote that reindeer dream messengers never deliver bad news twice. Once is apparently enough. And in Lapland, there was a game for children. Whoever dreamed of a reindeer first during the dark months won the right to choose the best seat at the spring feast. So if you're feeling competitive, now's the time to nap strategically. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of a village square, boots half buried in snow, and nose tingling with the scent of wood smoke, and something sweet honey bread maybe, or just the memory of it. The houses are ringed with evergreen boughs. The night feels heavy and expectant. Then through the hush, you hear it, the distant, unmistakable clatter of hooves, a soft snort, the gentle shake of bells. The reindeer have arrived. And just like that, it's time for the winter festival. Tonight, you're witnessing the ancient and ever-practical relationship between herds of reindeer and holy days. In many medieval communities, especially those skirting the Arctic Circle, the rhythms of village life weren't just shaped by the seasons, they were timed to the migrations of reindeer. If the herds were near, the party began. If the herds were late, you waited impatient and hungry, staring longingly at the horizon like a child waiting for snow. Here's your historical fact. In the north, many winter festivals, feasts, and even church holidays were quietly scheduled to coincide with the movement of the great reindeer herds. Not only were these animals critical for food and clothing, but their arrival marked the true start of communal celebration. Nobody wanted to begin a festival before the sacred guests showed up. It was as if Christmas and Thanksgiving couldn't start until the VIPs with antlers strolled in. Tonight's strange detail. Some old village calendars, painstakingly carved on reindeer antler or birch bark, had special notches or little antler-shaped marks indicating the likely dates the herds would pass by. Forget leap years, this was all about leap hooves. As the reindeer trot into the square, villagers begin to sing. The air fills with voices, some in harmony, some stubbornly independent, all buoyed by the excitement of reunion and survival. Cloaks swirl, lanterns bob, and somewhere a very determined grandmother waves a wreath and calls for quiet so the priest can give the blessing. The blessing naturally is more about the reindeer than the people. May your hooves be sure your nose is warm and your paths always find home. You join the crowd, feeling the warmth of so many bodies pressed together, the thrill of being part of something both ancient and immediately present. The reindeer get their own feast buckets of lickin', handfuls of dried apples, and the occasional highly coveted sugar lump. For the herders, it's a moment of pride. For everyone else, it's reassurance that the world, however cold and dark, is still turning as it should. Here's your academic question for tonight. Did these synchronized festivals help create the aura of sacredness around reindeer? Or did the sense of the animals as messengers inspire the timing of the festivals themselves? In other words, which came first, the party or the antlers? Scholars argue about it endlessly. Some believe practical necessity came first. Follow the herds, throw a party, thank the spirits, and hope for another good year. Others suggest the entire ritual calendar was built around the mystique of the reindeer, the idea that their presence signaled blessings, that their absence meant a community was out of sync with nature, and maybe the divine. You watch as a child ties a blue ribbon onto a reindeer's harness, whispering a wish for a new sled. A group of elders share stories about legendary reindeer one that found its way home from a blizzard, another that danced in the snow, though skeptics say it was just shaking off ice. At the far end of the square, a small table holds a bowl of water, a hunk of bread, and a carved wooden reindeer, a silent offering for luck in the year ahead. And here are 3 gentle facts for you to curl up with. In some villages, whoever spotted the first reindeer of the season got to light the ceremonial festival fire. No pressure. Some communities believed that if a reindeer snorted during the blessing, it was a sign of extra good fortune. If it sneezed, all bets were off. And yes, in a few particularly festive towns, people tried and mostly failed to train their reindeer to bow for the opening of the celebration. Most reindeer opted for dignified indifference, so before you relax, take a second to like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're moving through the heart of winter now, every breath sharp and clear, each exhale lingering in the crisp air like a floating ribbon. The landscape is quiet except for the gentle crunch of snow underfoot and the faint silvery sound of bells. But tonight, you're not just an observer. You're part of a procession, an oddly formal one, considering the freezing temperature making its slow way toward the largest hall in the village. At the front of the line, flanked by torchlight and incense smoke, walk the most dignified reindeer you've ever seen. Their antlers are adorned with strands of ribbon and bells, their noses dusted with a powder that glitters faintly in the firelight. Some even wear cloaks, yes, actual cloaks stitched from velvet and embroidered with silver thread draped across their backs with almost royal gravity. Tonight's historical fact. In some northern courts and wealthy noble houses, reindeer were not only sacred messengers, but also ceremonial participants in processions, weddings, and feast days. It became a custom to dress the most prized reindeer in elaborate garb for special occasions, not just for show, but as a mark of respect for their supposed connection to the spirit world. This wasn't just animal pageantry. It was a public, tangible symbol of gratitude and awe. And here's your wonderfully odd detail. The reindeer were sometimes perfumed. Yes, perfumed with incense or floral waters. The idea was to prepare them for the spirits, so that the sacred messenger would carry not only messages, but the sweet scent of prayer. One manuscript describes an entire recipe for reindeer-safe incense that included dried juniper lavender and a pinch of snowmelt. The reindeer may not have been impressed, but the priests certainly were. Tonight, the village crowd fills the great hall, which glows with lanterns, garlands, and the shimmer of fresh snow tracked in on boots. The cloaked reindeer are led into a place of honor, standing quietly, while the villagers offer bowls of lickin' apples, and for the very lucky, a cube of honeycomb. Elders sprinkle droplets of holy water, and a gentle chant rises, echoing against the timbered rafters. It sounds like both a hymn and a lullaby, a song for spirits and sledders alike. But there's something faintly comic about the dignity of it all. One reindeer, clearly the veteran of these ceremonies, eyes the crowd as if tallying up the snacks. Another, smaller, younger, less used to velvet, tries to rub its fancy cloak off on a post. You catch yourself grinning. Even the most sacred messenger is still at heart a creature who just wants to be comfortable. And now, the academic question: did this pageantry enhance the sacred aura of the reindeer? Or did it gradually turn reverence into spectacle? Some historians point to how the ceremonies grew more elaborate over the centuries, suggesting a shift from spiritual devotion to social performance. Others argue that the heart of the ritual, the honoring of the reindeer, remained unchanged, and that the showmanship was simply a way for communities to share the experience, to make the invisible visible. Before you start to nod off, here are 3 delightful details. In one noble house, a favorite reindeer was gifted a silver bell engraved with prayers for swift feet and gentle dreams. The bell still exists, now worn by a much less interested sheepdog. During processions, the villagers would sometimes sprinkle a trail of crushed juniper and lavender ahead of the reindeer as an aromatic path to the heavens. And in one case, a velvet cloak was passed down for generations, each owner sewing in a single strand of reindeer hair as a keepsake. By the end, it was more reindeer than velvet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim. The lights maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're back outside again, nose-red boots caked with snow, standing in line with a handful of villagers at the edge of the great communal hall. The reason for your little queue: you're holding a pair of antlers, big, heavy, cold, and much more important than you'd expect. Around you, others cradle smaller antlers fragments, or even single tines, some wrapped in cloth, some polished to a soft shine. Tonight, you're about to pay the antler tax. No, really. In certain medieval towns and settlements, particularly in the far north, villagers were required by both custom and law to surrender a portion of their collected or found reindeer antlers to the local temple or chieftain each winter. This tax wasn't about hoarding wealth, but channeling luck, keeping the cycle of fortune going, and occasionally making sure the local craftsmen never ran out of material. Here's your historical fact. Antlers were more than just decorations in medieval society. They were raw currency symbols of strength and key ingredients in charms and amulets. Temples used them to carve protective talismans or to make handles for sacred tools. Some pieces were even offered to shrines as gifts to the spirits, proof of gratitude for another winter survived. Tonight's delightfully odd detail. Some records suggest the antler tax collector wore a hat made entirely of tiny antler fragments, rattling with every step. If you're picturing a medieval maraca with antlers, you're not alone. And while the annual ritual could be solemn, it was often punctuated by laughter complaints about that one neighbor who always finds the biggest antler and friendly competition over whose piece would be chosen for the shrine centerpiece. You shuffle forward, antlers in hand, and the collector inspects each piece like a jeweler. Good antler gets a nod and a smile. Lesser specimens earn a shrug and a muttered maybe next year. After all, the spirits are said to be picky. Academic debate time. Was this antler tax just a practical solution to scarcity, cleverly dressed up in religious garb? Or did it really originate from deep-seated spiritual beliefs, a tangible expression of the community's relationship with the reindeer and the land? Some argue it was a bit of both a ritual that kept everyone invested, sometimes literally, in the herd's survival, while also giving the smiths and priests plenty of raw material for the year ahead. Inside the hall, the best antlers are cleaned, carved, and placed on the altar. Others are distributed for making household charms. You're handed a little piece, smooth, pale warm, from someone else's pocket, and told to keep it under your pillow for luck. Here are 3 charming curiosities before you drift away. In some villages, the antler tax was used as a community lottery. Whoever's antler was chosen for the altar got first taste of the festival feast. It was the medieval equivalent of winning the best slice of cake. Talismans carved from antler, especially those made during the new moon, were thought to ward off nightmares and bring clear dreams. If you want to test medieval sleep science, there's your method. There's one preserved amulet from a Finnish shrine, shaped like a running reindeer with a tiny spiral etched on its flank. It's small enough to tuck in your palm and was said to turn fear to snow. Not a bad trade, honestly. So before you settle in, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy the content here. Go ahead, lower the light switch on a gentle fan for some calming white noise, and let's begin our evening adventure. It's a blustery evening on the open tundra, and the wind is doing its best impression of a choir, sometimes howling, sometimes whistling, always singing in a key you can't quite follow. You're tucked into a thick cloak, following a procession of travelers moving steadily northward. At the front, a handful of reindeer led the way, their breath steaming and antlers gleaming in the moonlight. Among the travelers, a group that looks a little out of place, armored men bearing red crosses on white cloaks, whispering in a language that's decidedly not local. Tonight, you're hearing the tale of the Templar Knights and the Tundra Trials, one of those strange, seldom told legends about what happens when worlds collide, and only the reindeer know the way home. Here's your historical fact. There are scattered accounts, half rumor, half record, of European knights, including a splinter group of the Knights Templar, venturing north in the late 13th century. Most scholars agree they were seeking safe passage through the Arctic wilderness, whether for trade pilgrimage or more likely a retreat from political headaches farther south. Their guides, not horses, but local herders and their trusty reindeer. The most peculiar detail comes from a battered travel diary written in clumsy Latin found centuries later in a sodden chest. The diary describes a harrowing trek across endless snow and a night spent sharing fermented reindeer milk with their Sami hosts. The drink, it reads, is strong and makes the moon dance. If you've never tried reindeer milk fermented or otherwise, just know that it's an acquired taste, especially when flavored with local lichen and frost. As legend goes, one stormy night, the Templar group became hopelessly lost visibility, shrinking to the end of a mitten. Their Sami guides gathered the group and told them to trust the reindeer, let the animals choose the path, even if it made no sense. So with nothing but faith, and perhaps a few swigs of that dancing moon brew, the knights gave up their maps and let the reindeer lead. By dawn, the story says the travelers found themselves safe in a sheltered valley, not marked on any European chart, but well known to the reindeer and their herders. A feast followed dried fish moss bread, and a great deal of laughter at the knight's expense. From then on, the Templars swore an oath of snow brotherhood, with their guides promising mutual protection, and according to one tongue-in-cheek note, not to question the reindeer's sense of direction ever again. Academic debate for tonight. Did this snow brotherhood really happen? Or is it just a case of wishful storytelling by later chroniclers hungry for tales of northern adventure? Some scholars believe the records are exaggerated, blending real journeys with folk heroics. Others argue that something very like this could easily have happened. After all, survival in the tundra requires humility, adaptability, and knowing when to let a reindeer do the thinking. Here are 3 little-known tidbits to carry into your sleep. One Templar's lost shield was supposedly found years later used as a sled for reindeer calves. Function over fashion, medieval style. Some Sami oral histories remember the Red Cross warriors not as conquerors, but as clumsy, well-meaning guests who never did master skiing. And yes, there's a children's song in the region about a reindeer who rescued a knight by eating his map and showing him the stars. If only modern GPS came with antlers. So before you relax, take a second to like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. Now dim. The lights maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's a clear, bone-chilling night, so crisp that every star overhead feels close enough to pluck, and the world below seems carved from silver and shadow. You're standing at the edge of a small churchyard. Lanterns flicker in the windows. The air is thick with anticipation, and the faintest aroma of warm bread pine resin and curiously incense. Suddenly, the quiet breaks. Children bundled in sheepskin and laughter file out into the snow, each clutching a candle or a homemade bell. The reason: it's time for the annual reindeer carol, a tradition older than the steeple itself. If you're picturing little ones in angel wings, guess again. This medieval pageant is dedicated entirely to the sacred reindeer. Tonight's historical fact: in several northern villages, especially those too remote for traveling clergy to visit regularly, villagers developed their own seasonal rituals to honor the sacred reindeer. These often included processions and songs performed by children at midwinter, sometimes even weeks before the church's Christmas Mass. In fact, for some, the reindeer choir was the real start of the holy season. Here's your odd detail for the evening. Medieval records describe not just singing, but actual call and response exchanges between children and reindeer. The kids would sing shake bells and even recite rhymes. The reindeer, well, if you believe the stories, would sometimes snort paw the ground or answer with a perfectly timed grunt or toss of the head. One chronicler even claims a particularly musical reindeer once tapped its hoof in time, earning it the nickname Benedict the Beatrider. You take your place among the villagers as the procession weaves through the snowy lanes. The children's song, simple and haunting, floats on the air, a prayer for safe passage, warm homes, and luck in the long, dark months. At each doorstep, the choir pauses, offering a blessing and a small snack for the reindeer who wait patiently, occasionally nibbling on the offerings, or less patiently chewing on mitten tassels. Tonight's academic debate: were these rituals about reindeer, about community, or both? Some folklorists argue that the act of singing to animals reflects a deeper belief in the interconnection of all living things, a sort of medieval mindfulness, where acknowledging the reindeer's presence and role in survival brought the community closer together. Others think it was just a clever way to keep kids busy and awake during the darkest nights of winter, with the added bonus of well-fed, entertained reindeer. The festivities continue inside, where families gather around the hearth, exchanging stories of reindeer heroes and dream messengers. Someone pulls out a tattered hymn book, and a few brave souls attempt a verse dedicated to snow hooves and velvet noses. The reindeer never wants to linger where it's warm, eventually wander off, probably in search of moss, or maybe just a quieter place to listen to the wind. And here are 3 tidbits to hum you to sleep. One remote parish kept a bell of greeting by the stable. Each child who sang to the reindeer got to ring it, ensuring the animal would remember the song and bring luck. A local saying, "Went a reindeer that hears your wishes, carries them to the stars." Medieval wish fulfillment, hoof delivered. And yes, there was once a minor scandal when a particularly rowdy reindeer joined the choir indoors, briefly becoming the star of the show before being gently ushered out with an extra snack, of course. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The fog is thick tonight, swirling around your boots and muffling every footstep. It clings to fences and windows, and even the reindeer seem uneasy ears, twitching noses lifted as if sniffing for something just out of reach. The whole village moves with a strange caution. Tonight the air is charged with old stories and new worries. You're here for the annual count, a tradition as ancient as the settlement itself. Every household marks how many reindeer are in the communal herd. Torches glow, names are read, each animal checked until someone realizes the count is short. One herd, known as the Silver Branch, is simply gone. No tracks, no noise, nothing left behind except a patch of trampled grass, and oddly, a handful of herbs glowing faintly green in the mist. This isn't just an accounting error, it's the birth of legend. Here's your historical fact. Medieval chronicles across northern Europe record more than a dozen tales of vanishing herds, large groups of reindeer disappearing overnight, especially on the eve of festivals or religious processions. The official records always blame wolves, poachers, or bad weather. But ask the locals, and you'll get a different answer. Sometimes the reindeer walk into the fog and don't come back because they've been called elsewhere, carrying messages, prayers, or warnings to the spirit world. The quirky detail. In the margins of one 15th century parish register, someone sketched a clump of the same luminous herbs found at tonight's site and noted, "When the herd leaves, they light the path, so we may know not to follow." The herb, now called ghost thyme by later botanists, turns out to be a real plant that glows faintly at night, medieval bioluminescence hiding right under everyone's noses. The villagers gather in the hall debating theories. The more practical types blame the weather. Elders mutter about ancient debts being paid, or the reindeer being summoned to a feast on the other side. Children whisper that the glowing herbs are footprints left by reindeer angels. Everyone agrees that for at least a season luck will be thin. There's no ritual to bring the herd back, just stories, quiet hope, and careful waiting. Now for the scholar's favorite argument. Did these disappearing herd stories serve as cautionary tales to protect the animals from overhunting? Were they used to explain the unpredictable cycles of nature, or as reminders of the mysterious relationship between humans, reindeer, and the world beyond? Or, best of all, were they just the medieval way of telling children? Sometimes, things go missing, and that's part of life. As the night deepens, the mist thickens. You catch sight of a single reindeer standing at the edge of the fog, head held high, antlers haloed by the faint glow of ghost time. It looks at you, calm-wise, a little bit sad, and then steps silently into the white, leaving only silence behind. Here are 3 dreamlike facts for your sleep. Some herders kept a pouch of ghost time near their door, believing it would keep their remaining reindeer safe. In one famous poem, the vanishing herd returns with the green of spring antlers, bright with moonlight hearts full of news. And in at least one case, the missing reindeer were found a week later on the far side of a frozen lake, completely unharmed, except for sprigs of ghost time tangled in their fur. So before you relax, take a second to like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. Turn down the lights, perhaps start a fan to create a soothing ambiance, and join me as we slowly dive into tonight's story. You're in the deep forest now, where the trees crowd together, their trunks etched with ice, and the odd scratch mark, some from wandering animals, some left by human hands in need of guidance. The snow here is softer, muffling every step until it feels like you're drifting instead of walking. You pause in a small clearing where the air vibrates with something old and unseen. Sitting cross-legged in the center, framed by a circle of pine cones and bones, is a shaman. His cloak is patched with fur feathers and, of course, reindeer hide. Tonight you're stepping into the world of shamans and snow prints, where reindeer are not just messengers, but partners in rituals that blur the line between waking and dreaming. Your historical fact for tonight. Across medieval northern Europe and Siberia, shamans called noides among the Sami held reindeer in special regard. They believed these animals could cross boundaries between herds, between villages, and between the worlds of the living and the spirits. When a shaman needed to communicate with ancestors or call for guidance, reindeer were essential not just as mounts or sacrificial gifts, but as fellow travelers on the journey. The odd detail. Many shamanic ceremonies included dancing around snow prints, literally circling fresh reindeer tracks, while singing or drumming sometimes for hours. The tracks were seen as portals or signatures left by spirit messengers. If the prints were clear and unbroken, it was a good omen. If they zigzagged or doubled back, the shaman would pause, consult the spirits, and if needed, repeat the dance until the path was right. And then there's the Nam Bay. Yes, you heard right, fly, agaric mushrooms. The red and white spotted ones you've seen in fairy tale illustrations played a central role in many winter rituals. When consumed carefully, they were said to help shamans enter trances, travel great distances in spirit, and understand the silent language of reindeer. It was believed that reindeer immune to the toxins ate the mushrooms to see beyond the snow. There's even a story of a reindeer who led a shaman all the way to a hidden valley stopping only for another bite of mushroom along the way. The academic debate for your evening. Did these rituals emerge independently in different cultures? Or did the tradition of the reindeer shaman travel like the herds themselves across continents and centuries? Some argue that the practices were passed from Siberia through Scandinavia, evolving with local beliefs and needs. Others suggest that whenever people live closely with reindeer, the line between animal and spiritual companion naturally blurs. As the shaman finishes his chant, the reindeer at the edge of the clearing steps forward. Its breath hangs in the air thick and slow. The shaman gently presses his palm to the animal's flank and whispers something, maybe a thank you, maybe a question for the ancestors. The reindeer flicks an ear. For a moment, the world feels weightless, like you're standing on the threshold of a dream. Before you drift away, here are 3 final curiosities. In some regions, shamans would tie small pouches of fly agaric or carved antler charms to their staffs, believing these would help call the right herd in times of need. One medieval song tells of a shaman who rode on the back of a reindeer antlers tipped with frost heartlight as falling snow returning at dawn, with news from the other side. And yes, it was common to leave a ring of bread or cheese around fresh reindeer tracks so the spirits don't walk hungry. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at the winter market long before the sun, if you can even call that pale, half-hearted glow on the horizon. A sun rises over the snow-drifted fields. The village is a hive of energy, with tents made from stitched hides, stalls built from branches, and braziers sending up smoke signals for anyone with a frozen nose and something to trade. The true stars, however, aren't the merchants or the weavers, or even the grumpy baker with his honey bread. No, the real celebrities here are the reindeer clustered near the main square antlers, tangled and coats brushed to a shine. Tonight, you're following the reindeer traders, an odd mix of herders, dealmakers, and would-be poets who've traveled days, sometimes weeks, to bring their animals to the market. Reindeer aren't just livestock. In the medieval North, they're walking bank accounts, messengers of luck, and the social glue that holds winter together. Here's your historical fact. In many northern trading posts, especially in Scandinavia and Russia, reindeer were among the most valued forms of wealth. They were exchanged for salt grain wool, and even tools imported from distant cities. Because of their spiritual importance, strict laws existed to prevent overtrading or the capture of sacred messenger reindeer. A trader who broke the rules could be exiled or at the very least forced to spend the season eating nothing but boiled moss. And now, for your market oddity, reindeer sometimes wore painted symbols on their flanks to indicate if they belonged to a messenger line. Animals marked with a spiral or a cross were off limits for trade, supposedly protected by both the spirits and the law. There are market records of heated arguments, with herders insisting their reindeer had a message to deliver and should not be parted from their herd. More than one trade was stopped by a village elder, squinting suspiciously at a painted mark and declaring, "This one's already spoken for by the snow." You drift among the stalls, sampling fir needle tea and watching merchants haggle over antlers, sleigh bells, and bags of cloudberries. At one table, a scribe records every exchange, noting down the reindeer's color age and, amusingly, its personality, reluctant, prone to stomping, but loyal if given apples. There's even a blessing booth, where new owners receive a charm woven from reindeer hair and twine to ensure their purchase brings good luck and safe travels. Tonight's academic debate. Were these market rituals mainly for show, or did they represent a genuine attempt to balance economy with respect for tradition and the spiritual status of reindeer? Some historians argue that the strict regulations reflect the community's anxiety about losing touch with sacred customs in the face of commerce. Others believe the rules were mostly pragmatic: keep the herds healthy, keep the traders honest, and keep the local spirits happy. As you sip your tea and watch a young herder tie a painted ribbon onto his favorite reindeer, here are 3 curiosities for your dreams. In one legendary winter, a single reindeer was bought back 5 times in a day, as owners discovered its spiral mark each time and returned it with a bow. Some markets had song duels, where rival traders would try to outsing each other to attract the attention of prized reindeer. Yes, even the animals seemed to pick favorites. And in a remote region, an old law states that if a messenger reindeer is mistakenly traded, the buyer must send it home with gifts and an apology, or risk a season of bad luck and lost messages. So before you settle in, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy the content here. Go ahead, lower the light switch on a gentle fan for some calming white noise, and let's begin our evening adventure. You find yourself inside a smoky cottage, warmed by the glow of a peat fire and the steady, comforting presence of reindeer clustered just outside the door. Hanging from the beams are dried herbs, twisted roots, and strangest of all, several gleaming pieces of reindeer antler polished to a shine. On the table, beside a worn leather pouch and a battered mortar, lies a roll of thick parchment. Its title, Remedies of the Frozen North. Tonight, you're paging through the medieval medical kit, a place where folklore, desperate hope, and a surprising amount of science come together, all thanks to the reindeer. Your historical fact. For centuries, healers across northern Europe and Russia used nearly every part of the reindeer for medicine. Antlers were ground to powder to help bones knit and bruises fade. Fresh velvet, that fuzzy layer on growing antlers, was soaked in honey and used as a poultice for wounds. And reindeer milk, high in fat and warmth, was fed to sick children, the elderly, and anyone fighting off a winter fever. It wasn't just survival, it was medicine wrapped in myth. Tonight's peculiar detail. In a particularly odd case from a 15th century Lapland chronicle, a healer treated a chronic insomniac by wrapping a sliver of antler, a tuft of reindeer hair, and a pinch of dried moss in linen, then tucking it under the pillow. The sleeper's dreams grew gentler, and his eyes remembered the quiet of snow, she wrote. No word on whether the dreams included reindeer hoofbeats, but it seems likely. Of course, not all remedies were so gentle. Some healers claimed that boiling reindeer hoof with willow bark made a soup for stubborn headaches, and there are records of antler being steeped in wine as a medieval energy drink. Others made tiny charms from reindeer bone said to protect the wearer from frostbite and night terrors, though most people just wore them for luck. This brings us to tonight's academic debate. Did these medical practices grow out of actual observed effects? Or were they largely ritual, a way to weave hope and community into the hard facts of survival? Some scholars argue that reindeer remedies contained real benefits, especially the use of velvet antler and milk. Others say the magic was mostly in the ritual itself, a reminder that you belonged, that your pain mattered, and that even in the darkest night, the gifts of the herd were always close. Before you drift off beside the hearth, 3 gentle facts for your bedside. In some households, it was tradition to hang a small carved antler over a newborn's cradle to keep away fever and bad dreams. One Russian herbal manuscript claims reindeer milk, when mixed with pine sap, opens the chest to better breathing. Modern science is still on the fence about this one. And in remote hamlets, families made dream bundles of antler hair and moss for every traveler setting out alone, a portable dose of calm for the road ahead. So before you relax, take a second to like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to the first true blush of spring. If spring here means only that the snow is slightly less aggressive, and the wind occasionally smells like wet earth instead of pure frost. There's a buzz in the village. Today is the festival of painted antlers, a rare and riotous burst of color in a world usually ruled by white and gray. You step outside and see children and grown-ups alike hunched over long tables set with clay pots, brimming with pigments, ochre blue from berries, yellow from lichen red from crushed roots. There's laughter in the air, and even the reindeer seem to sense the mood crowding closer to the people snuffling pockets for treats and nosing the paint-stained hands of their human companions. Tonight, you're watching a tradition that turns every reindeer into a walking wish, every person into an artist, and every antler into a message board for the gods. Here's your historical fact. In parts of northern Scandinavia and Russia, spring festivals included the ancient rite of painting reindeer antlers. People believed that decorating the antlers with bright colors and symbols could send their hopes, prayers, and intentions up to the sky. Each pattern carried meaning, a spiral for luck dots, for good health stripes, for safe travel stars, for bountiful herds. After painting, villagers would paint their own faces to mirror the animals blurring the line between human and herd. The odd detail for tonight. In a 14th century travel diary, a foreign merchant described arriving in a Sami village just in time for the festival. He wrote, "Children chase the deer, marking them with laughter and color, while elders mark their own brows. The reindeer walk among us as if they know the wishes they carry." He also claims that no 2 antler patterns were ever alike, a living archive of the village's hopes. You watch as an elder, her hands stained green and gold, explains to a group of children how to paint a wish for a gentle summer. The reindeer stand calmly, occasionally flicking their ears or shaking their heads to dry the paint faster. Some even seem to pose proud to carry a dozen colors atop their heads. Tonight's academic question: did these painted antler rituals truly send messages to the divine, or did they serve as a way for the community to bond, remember, and pass down tradition in a language more vivid than words? Some historians think the art had spiritual power. Others see it as the world's first crowdsourced diary, a way for each person child or elder hunter or healer to leave a mark for the season ahead. Before you let sleep overtake you, here are 3 colorful details. In some villages, the person whose antler art lasted the longest before fading in the rain was believed to have their wish granted first. One ancient face-painting recipe mixed berry juice with melted snow, said to make the spirits smile and the cold retreat. And yes, on festival nights, the village would leave painted antlers in a circle at the edge of the forest, a rainbow crown for any wandering spirit, or as some children hoped for the gods to wear if they ever visited. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim. The lights maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's one of those nights that feels endless clouds racing low across the moon, wind rattling the shutters, and the whole village pressed close to the fire, listening for things that might not be there. You sense it in the way people whisper, the way old stories come back when the winter just won't end. And tonight, as the bells toll quietly, a hush falls. Someone is about to tell the tale of the ghost herd procession. You wrap your blanket tighter as the oldest villager leans in her eyes bright in the firelight. She begins. When the season goes long and hunger creeps at the door, a line of reindeer sometimes appears silent, pale as the fog their antlers, catching what little moonlight slips through the clouds. No hoof print marks their passing. No breath steams in the cold. They move in a slow, steady procession through the village and into the woods beyond. Here's your historical fact. Many communities in medieval Scandinavia and Siberia held deep-rooted beliefs in the ghost herd apparitions of reindeer seen during especially harsh winters or years when spring came late. These spectral animals weren't seen as omens of doom, but as guides, spirits sent to lead the living out of darkness and back toward the promise of warmth. Witnessing the ghost herd was both a warning and a blessing. Time to prepare, time to pray, time to look for the way forward. And now, for the truly odd detail. In more than one village, there was a secret ritual for the night the ghost herd was seen. Every family would place a candle or lantern in their window, a bowl of water on the step, and a handful of salt on the hearth offerings meant to light the way for lost spirits and ensure the herd would lead the spring back home. Some accounts claim that where the ghost herd passed, the snow would melt a day earlier, flowers blooming in hoof-shaped clusters. Tonight's academic question: did belief in the ghost herd evolve as a way to cope with hardship and give hope in desperate times? Or was it a remnant of older animist traditions, a way to honor ancestors and the natural cycles of the land? Some folklorists argue the stories were practical morale boosters for grim seasons. Others say they are evidence of a worldview in which everything, even winter, has a spirit and a story to tell. The fire pops and the story winds down. Someone hums an old tune, soft as snow falling. Outside, the wind dies, and for a moment, you could almost believe you see a pale shape moving through the darkness, antlers aglow with borrowed light. Here are 3 whispered details to take with you into sleep. Some elders sprinkled flour outside the door after a ghost herd sighting, believing the tracks would bring luck, or at the very least something to marvel at in the morning. Children were told not to follow the procession, but a few brave souls left tiny wooden reindeer by the path as a greeting just in case. And yes, one story tells of a herd that appeared in midsummer, ushering in a rare early thaw and a summer so warm the villagers joked the reindeer had carried the sun on their backs. So before you relax, take a second to like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. Turn down the lights, perhaps start a fan to create a soothing ambiance, and join me as we slowly dive into tonight's story. You're standing outside under a sky so clear you feel you could count every star, and perhaps tonight you're meant to. Villagers are gathering on a snowy ridge, eyes turned upward, hands cupped against the cold. Tonight is the night of the star readers, a time when the boundary between earth and sky reindeer and constellations seems thinner than a blade of ice. A line of reindeer grazes quietly nearby, their breath curling up to join the faint ribbon of the Milky Way. Some villagers claim that these animals, more than any compass or clever traveler, know how to find their way by reading the sky. If you listen to the elders, you'll hear that the stars and reindeer have been partners for as long as stories have been told. Here's your historical fact. Medieval chroniclers in Northern Europe and Russia sometimes credited reindeer with an uncanny sense for navigating in the dark. Herds would set out across vast, featureless tundra, guided only by instinct, or so it seemed. But old Sami and Evenki traditions describe how herders watched the animals' movement under the stars, learning from the ways reindeer tilted their heads or paused to orient themselves beneath certain constellations. Some believed reindeer were drawn to particular stars, leading their people safely home through blizzards and night. Tonight's peculiar detail. Medieval stargazers occasionally noted reindeer patterns in the night sky, not just the common shapes of bears or swans, but antler-shaped groupings said to mark the seasons and forecast weather. In one battered monk's journal, there's a doodle of Orion's belt, with two branching antlers beside it captioned, "When these horns point north, let no one travel, snow comes swiftly." Amateur meteorology, medieval style. As the villagers settle in, a shaman steps forward with a painted staff, tracing invisible lines from star to star. He tells of how the herd in the heavens mirrors the herds on earth, and that when the reindeer below bow their heads to graze, they honor the sky as kin. A child tucked in a fur cloak tries to copy the gesture, nose to snow, drawing a giggle from the circle. Here's tonight's academic thought. Was this belief in reindeer as star guides based on careful observation passed down as wisdom, or did it grow from a longing to find meaning and comfort in a world ruled by night and cold? Some scholars say practical skill inspired myth. Others think the myth was what made skill so precious to the community. Before you drift off, 3 glimmering facts to cradle in your thoughts. Some villages marked important dates on antler calendars, carving notches to record both the migration of herds and the rise of certain stars. Travelers sometimes tied a scrap of blue cloth to their sled or staff before a journey, hoping to catch the luck of a clear sky and a wise reindeer. And yes, there's a lullaby about a reindeer who leaps over the moon and carries dreams on its antlers, sung to children just as the constellations rise. So before you get comfortable, Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's late now, the kind of late where the moon is just a sliver and the whole world feels wrapped in silver blue hush. The village is quiet. The last embers in the hearth flicker low, and even the reindeer are tucked into the shadows, only their breath and the soft jingle of a bell betraying their presence. You sense a gentle sadness in the air, like the last note of a favorite song or the final page of a well-loved story. Tonight, you witness the end of an era, the moment when the bells of the ceremonial reindeer procession finally fall silent. Here's your historical fact. As the late Middle Ages gave way to the early modern period, everything began to change. Roads improved. Markets grew, new animals and customs arrived from afar. The ancient rituals, the parades, the songs, the blessing of reindeer messengers grew quieter. Some communities kept the traditions alive as best they could. Others let them fade into memory, making room for new beliefs and ways of life. The peculiar detail. In several villages, it was customary for the oldest reindeer, one who had led processions for years, to walk the route alone, one final time before being retired. Elders watched in silence. Children scattered handfuls of dried moss or flower petals, and bells were removed from the harness with slow, reverent hands. The reindeer would be set free, a living symbol of all that had been and all that would linger in the heart. There's an ache here, but also beauty. As customs faded, many in the far north spoke of a subtle melancholy that came each spring, a sense of loss for the festivals that no longer rang out, for the herds that passed without song or ceremony. And yet, in lullabies and winter tales, the reindeer remained transformed from sacred messengers on snowy roads into gentle spirits who watched over homes, guided lost travelers, and visited the dreams of children. Tonight's academic debate: was this quieting of the old rituals a true loss, or just the natural ebb and flow of culture as the world moved on? Some say it's nostalgia talking. Others believe that the memory of the reindeer's role still shapes Northern identity in ways both subtle and profound. Before you drift away, here are 3 gentle thoughts to keep you company. In some homes, the last reindeer bell was hung by the hearth, to be rung only when the winter felt especially long and hope needed waking. A handful of stories claim that on the coldest nights, the spirits of the messenger reindeer still pass silently through the village antlers, gleaming like stars. And yes, even today, some families leave a little bread on the windowsill each winter for the messenger who never truly leaves. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Tonight you find yourself on the edge of everything, the last frozen ridge before the world softens into endless sky. The horizon is a pale line, and the snow is deeper here, nearly untouched, except for a single winding path, a trail pressed by the hooves of reindeer. Your breath comes slow, each inhale, pulling in the faint scent of lichen and pine sap. All around, there's a quiet that feels heavier than silence, a pause before the end of a story. This is the last sacred trail, a journey told in half-remembered songs and fading legends. You're following a band of messengers wrapped in thick cloaks and hope their sleds pulled by reindeer that move with careful urgency. There's a feeling in the air, something final, something almost holy. Here's your historical fact. In the late medieval period, when wars or border conflicts broke out across the northern lands, neutral messengers were sometimes sent to deliver news requests for truce or even warnings across the tundra. Horses and human couriers were too obvious, too vulnerable. Reindeer blending with the landscape and known to all could cross territories where people dared not walk. There are sparse but persistent records of antler-borne envoys who traveled under the protection of both local custom and a kind of unspoken truce, a sacred pact that at least for the length of the journey even enemies would respect. Tonight's peculiar detail. Some messengers wore bells not on themselves, but on the reindeer's harness, 3 distinct notes that signaled a peaceful mission to anyone within earshot. One old account tells of a lone rider and his reindeer arriving at an enemy camp in the blue hour before dawn, bearing a branch of pine as a sign of goodwill. The guards let them pass without question, and a ceasefire was arranged before noon. When the rider returned, he tied a scrap of blue cloth to the reindeer's antlers, a symbol of safe return that over time became a quiet tradition among winter envoys. There's a debate here too, of course. Some historians see these sacred reindeer missions as largely myth retrofitted onto vague travel logs by later storytellers hungry for meaning. Others point to the consistency of the details, the bells, the blue cloth, the absence of violence as evidence of a real, if rare, practice, a fleeting moment where hope and trust rode on hooves. You watch as the caravan glides over a frozen lake, the reindeer's breath rising in gentle clouds, the bell's notes bright against the hush. The snow muffles every other sound, turning the world into a kind of cathedral. At the end of the trail, a small group waits figures from rival villages, hands empty, eyes wide. No one speaks at first. The only sound is the quiet clink of antlers and the wind slipping between them. As the message is handed over, there's a pause. One of the elders ties a strip of blue ribbon around the lead reindeer's neck and bows his head. The journey is finished. The peace, fragile as frost, will hold a little longer. Here are 3 soft details to close this trail. In a few rare instances, the reindeer of peace missions were granted freedom, afterward never yoked again, allowed to wander as they pleased. Local children whispered that these reindeer carried the world's secrets in their hearts. There are lullabies from the far north sung about antlers in the twilight bells and the blue, soothing children through the longest nights. And yes, in at least one story, a rival chieftain was so moved by a messenger's courage that he sent a whole herd of reindeer home with the envoys so that every journey would be a little safer and every winter a little less lonely. So before you settle in, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy the content here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.